Hello, Bitcoin Nashville. Oops. We'll switch this up.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. How is everyone doing this afternoon? Thank you for being here.
Whoa.
We appreciate it. My name is Charlene Fadirepo. I'm a Bitcoin activist and advocate, and I'm the author of the upcoming book, The Bitcoin Leap, How Bitcoin is Transforming Africa. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Before I get into the discussion, I want to set the stage. Africa, large continent, 1.4 billion people, 54 countries, 42 central banks, 41 currencies, and 4,000 languages. All of those factors create a scenario that makes Bitcoin not only survive, but thrive. And today we're going to talk about how and why. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Femi Longe, who is the new Bitcoin lead from HRF. We have, thank you, Kgothatso Ngako, who is the CEO and the catalyst of Machankura. And Janet Maingi, who is the COO and a co-founder of Gridless. Thank you all for being here with me today. So you heard the titles and the names of our panelists, but I'd like our panelists to take a moment and tell us what you do and the impact that you're having in Africa. And we'll start with Femi.
Okay. Really great to be here. My name is Femi. I'm from Nigeria. On Monday, I start my first official day as Global Bitcoin Lead at the Human Rights Foundation. But for the last 2.5 years, I've supported the training of software engineers across Africa and getting them into Bitcoin development, and very specifically in the last 9 months into open source Bitcoin development. I think what attracted me to doing this is an understanding that Africa needs to engage Bitcoin as technology different from the way we've engaged previous waves of technology, which has been as consumers. And so for me, I think it's important that we find people who have the capability to understand Bitcoin as technology, to be able to unpack that technology and put it back together again to solve the unique problems we have in the continent. And that's what motivates me, that's what drives me, and that's what I'm taking into the new job I'm starting.
Thank you, Femi. Kgothatso?
Cool. I'm Kgothatso Ngako, and I'm building out Machankura, which is a Bitcoin wallet that allows people to send and receive Bitcoin without internet. Right? Main reason for it is that the internet penetration levels across the African continent are somewhere between 30 to 40%. And if you are going to make a payment, both parties in the payment need the ability to send or receive the Bitcoin. Right? So yeah, I saw that as a blocker. Not everyone has internet. The people who do, not everyone has a flagship Android device, which is what you need to install most Bitcoin wallets. And if you don't have a flagship Android device, your phone runs out of storage space after you install TikTok and start watching all these TikTok videos, and you are not going to delete any of your favorite TikTok videos to install yet another Bitcoin wallet. And yeah, the other issue is, smartphones, internet, and not everyone has a smartphone as well. A lot of people use feature phones. So Machankura tries to address those 3 issues.
Okay. Can we get Kgothatso a hand, please? Janet.
Yeah, so my name is Janet Maingi. I'm working for Gridless, and what we do is use renewable energy in Africa to mine Bitcoin. The interesting part of this is we use the stranded energy. So this is energy that is not being monetized, that's generated every day, but is not put in use. And the exciting part of all this is because we believe by doing this, we're going to catalyze electrification of rural Africa. Just to give an interesting part of this angle is 2/3 of our population, about 600 million Africans, don't have access to electricity. So we believe that it could be baby steps, but these baby steps are going to electrify Africa.
All right. Okay, so I want to start by focusing on the financial freedom and financial inclusion side of Bitcoin. So Kgothatso, you talked a little bit about Machankura. Can you tell us about the countries that you're currently in, and maybe tell us how people are using your product and how you're just sharing and expanding financial access?
Okay, so first and foremost, Machankura is accessible in almost any country through WhatsApp. Right? But that's just the secondary interface. The primary interface is the USSD interface, and that's available in South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Malawi, Zambia, and Namibia. Right? I may be forgetting one other country, but yeah. And the main reason for it is just give people a way to send and receive Bitcoin.
Good. Okay. So let's transition. So Janet, you had a presentation earlier. You mentioned that energy was the base layer of progress. Tell us more about the work that you're doing with Gridless and how you guys are changing lives all over Africa.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we use stranded energy to mine Bitcoin. Now, with the background of understanding that 600 million Africans don't have electricity, what has happened is when we go into relationship, into partnerships with these with the power generation companies, they're now being able to monetize energy that they've been generating, but getting 0 shillings or 0 cents to it. So what has then, the ripple effect of that is by being able to monetize their power plants, they're able to have actually more connectivities going to homes in terms of communities, and also from my ecosystem perspective. So think about schools, think about health centers, think about gas stations. They're all getting powered up. And just to paint a picture, when you talk about electricity in Africa, we're not talking about, this house that is well lit up and people are able to watch TV and to run their refrigerators. We're talking about just lighting one single bulb so that somebody can move from the dark ages, as I call them. And we've seen where our children are studying using paraffin lamps. The effect of the paraffin lamps, it messes up your eyesight because they're very dim. And then secondly, the fumes which are coming from paraffin really mess up their lungs and all that. So there's also a health challenge to that. So it's exciting to start seeing that with us helping the power partner monetize electricity. We have communities that the children who are getting better grades. We have health centers, which means our children are getting vaccinated. They don't have to go for miles and miles looking for treatment. Yeah. And then beyond that, we are almost running a 24-hour economy because shopkeepers now, instead of closing their shops at 5 p.m., because they're concerned about darkness and security, they're able to run their shops longer, 10 o'clock or even way into the night, which again pushes for economic prosperity in the spaces.
No, that's great. And sometimes we don't think about kind of the health and wellness aspects of Bitcoin. You don't hear about that. So just the fact that folks are having greater access to healthcare, better access to healthcare, they can take better care of themselves. That's another kind of long-term, long-stage effect of Bitcoin. Okay. So, Femi, let's talk about Bitcoin education. So in your prior roles, you've worked on educating Bitcoin developers and product developers. I'd love for you to give us a sense of where the Bitcoin core developer or product developer ecosystem is now and where you see it going.
Thank you. So to give context, when you hear people say Bitcoin has no utility, I think oftentimes they're thinking about Bitcoin in the context of the West. Mm-hmm. And in Africa, we have a unique situation. You mentioned 41 currencies. A few years ago, we signed the African Free Trade Agreement. But how do you trade with someone when both of you have different currency and your currency has no utility outside your own country? And so the way we've come at education and Bitcoin education is we've specifically looked at the people that can build utility products on the back of Bitcoin. So there is general user education. This is how to start a wallet. This is how to all that. This is what Bitcoin is. I think that's great. But I think if we stop there, then we'll just create Africans as consumers in Bitcoin. And for me, for the work we do, we don't think that's utilizing what we can actually bring to the network. And so a strong focus is get the people to know how Bitcoin works as technology, and then get them to start focusing their attention on real African problems and building solutions on real African problems that are driven, that can drive, that you can use Bitcoin to solve. So like KG solving the problem of people who don't have access to the internet. We have developers who are solving, one of the developers from our program is launching a product called Mava Pay, where Africans can send their local currency straight into a bank account in Nigeria through a Lightning address. So I send money from my Lightning wallet to a Lightning address, and it instantly appears in my dad's fiat bank account in Nigeria. That's because they understood this technology, but they understand the reality that there's a ton of our continent that's in the diaspora that need to send funding home to people who, at the moment, still spend their lives in fiat currency. And the process of negotiating through brokers just makes that experience painful. There's another group that's looking at SACCOs, cooperatives, group saving, and using that on the back of Bitcoin. So the intention is that we're both contributing to improving the Bitcoin technology, but we're also showing the real human use cases of Bitcoin in the things that affects people's lives every day. And we're doing it because we understand both the technology as well as the nuances and the reality of their lives.
Yeah, and I think that's, when you're trying to teach Bitcoin, this case of utility is the easiest way to teach it. And I think, you've heard from Janet, Kgothatso, and Femi, all of these incredible use cases of where Bitcoin shows up and makes life better for people. And that is probably the easiest way you can teach Bitcoin. So I have a question for all of you, and I would like you to answer it as simply as possible. Why Bitcoin? In your own words. And let's start with KG.
Okay, cool. Right. So before Bitcoin, and also to add to the previous answer, I was a software developer who had a lot of ideas, and I would build out all these ideas. And one of the ideas was a Twitter client, and it gained some traction, and then I learned that Twitter, or the Twitter API, limits how many logins a third-party client could have, right? Because Twitter wants people to access the platform through the main Twitter client so that they make money through ads, right? Which I have no beef on, but as a developer who then dedicated a lot of time on the project, I was like, wait, so if I actually manage to get this client to grow, I'll be stuck. I'll be capped on the user base I could have, and I'd be working on workarounds for that. And I made a decision to never build on somebody else's platform there and then, right? Mm-hmm. And as the years pass, I learned a little bit more about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is, for me, the answer to that. Never build on somebody else's platform. It's an open source, decentralized network, not just the technology, but a whole society, air quotes. And when you are building on top of it, you can take the time you need to learn how Bitcoin works. Like, I learned about Bitcoin for like 5 years before I decided to write a piece of code for it, right? And the things I learned over those 5 years are still relevant today. And it's slow moving enough that if you do decide to start participating today, even 10 years from now, whatever idea you think you should build will still be relevant. Well, and a lot of people say we're still early. And yeah, so for me, that is the core thing with Bitcoin. It's slow moving, and it's not anybody else's platform. And if you choose to build on it today, well, even if you don't choose to build on it today, you can make that decision whatever time in the future. It will still be there for you as a builder and as an entrepreneur as well. I think we're going to see way more entrepreneurs doing business across the African continent because of Bitcoin. I'll end it here. And what's interesting, we've had digital payments in Africa with mobile money and M-Pesa, right?
Indeed.
And I compare that to South Africa, which doesn't have a successful mobile money. We have so many different payment options when you go to websites, but if I visit the very same website, Betway, in Kenya, the only payment option is mobile money. Right? In South Africa is Ozo, Stitch, so on and so forth. And I feel like if we don't innovate enough, we're going to be stuck. And in some cases, stuck with mobile money in places like Kenya and other countries where mobile money succeeded. So yeah.
And just really quickly on that point, KG, can you talk more about mobile money for people who may not be aware of it?
She's going to talk about
we
it.
can pivot to, Jana, who is in Kenya, and this is kind of, Kenya was the birthplace of mobile money, and that's a really good point, and I'd love for you to answer why Bitcoin, but also contrast mobile money to Bitcoin money as well, because I think that distinction is very important.
Okay, I'm about to claim being Malawian now. Okay, so let's start with the mobile money question. Basically, we have this app or service called M-Pesa, and which allows us to actually transact. I would think from a digital currency perspective. So it's still our currency, so Kenya shillings, but we're able to push it from one wallet to the other one without physically transferring money. So if you come to Kenya today, whether you're going to the supermarkets, or we call them grocery stores, or you are trying to buy vegetables at your local kiosk outside your house, everybody accepts Bitcoin. So the adoption has been, I think, at about 97%.
Sure.
Nobody knows what to do if so when M-Pesa goes down, it's a Kenyan crisis, right? The government has to answer what's going on. Safaricom is in trouble because we cannot access our transactions because M-Pesa has become our daily lives. So for traders, they're able to hold wallets where they're able to get loans. They're able to transact from your bank to your wallet or from your wallet back to your bank. I can send money to my mother. While I'm sitting here today, I can send money to my mother in exactly 5 seconds, right? So that's what M-Pesa is. It's just basically a digital platform that allows us to push money from one point to the other.
Yeah. So when M-Pesa goes down, we are reminded Bitcoin never goes down. But
Right. And M-Pesa is owned by
Safaricom
and the Kenyan government.
Kenya government and Vodacom,
So, so M-Pesa mobile money is highly centralized.
Very
centralized. Which is problematic. Very good. All right. So can you answer why Bitcoin from your perspective?
So can I answer why not Bitcoin? Okay. So energy, as I say, is the base layer of humanity. And now we're getting to a stage where we are looking at Bitcoin being a deflationary asset that you can use to leverage against an inflationary asset, which will be the US, like the US dollar. Now, when you think of the energy space, for you to build a mini grid or a power plant, it's very capex intensive. And so one of the struggles that we're seeing with different people, especially in Africa, is access to capital. Because when you go to the West and request to get capital, the first question is, what's your business plan? And business plans means how many consumers, how many of those things you have to answer. Now we are moving towards an angle where we are focusing to make sure that Gridless becomes the first buyer resort, which means that will be the first consumer you'll get before you're able to expand or transmit the electricity. But the approach we want to take is looking at Africa and all the natural resources we have. So think of renewables, solar, hydro, geothermal, biomass. There's a lot of potential for Africa. So the approach now Gridless is going towards is actually building our own energy, where at first we start mining Bitcoin as the transmission is built and then it's distributed to the consumers. And as the consumer base grows up, then we become the buyer of last resort. And so why Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin, I believe, is going to be the key to open this potential for Africa.
Okay. Femi?
I think I'll go a bit high level. And high level because that's what attracted me to the technology. I think if we think the world is broken, try and think about that broken world from the perspective of the person that's at the bottom of the chain. And sadly, we come from the continent that at least in the last 50, 60, 100 years, maybe last 200 or 400 years has been at the bottom of the chain. In the 40s, in the 50s, right after World War II, and countries in Europe were forced to decolonize and let the natives go. They decided to continue financial colonization using tools like the IMF and the World Bank to make sure that our continent, even with all our resources, still remains the poorest in the world because they extract resources from us and then you give us aid. And then you treat us as if we don't have dignity. And for me, I know that for Africa trying to prosper in that kind of system is kind of like trying to fill up a basket with water. It's not possible. Simple. So we need a new system, A new system that's built on dignity, that's built on everybody being able to transact and be treated as equals, as with respect, because they're bringing something of value and they're getting something of value in return. And that can't happen in the current system. And what I see Bitcoin as is as the bomb that will blow up the current system and will form the foundation of that new system where Africa can be treated with respect and dignity so that we can let the people of my continent live their full potential.
Please, KG.
Yeah, I'd just like to add another point to this. The other beauty of Bitcoin, which is why Gridless is in Kenya, Malawi, Zambia, which is why Machankura is in South Africa, Kenya, Malawi, Namibia, is that you write code once and it works in any country in the world, right? You come up with an idea and it works with in any country in the world that fits the criteria you have, right? Gridless focus is remote locations with renewable energy that want to monetize the energy without being plugged to the grid. That is pretty much anywhere in the world, and that works pretty much anywhere in the world. Machankura, anywhere with a mobile cellular connection, you can have a Bitcoin wallet. That is any country in the world. If I deploy, I don't look at the same things PayPal looks at. I look at, okay, cool. Can I get an integrator in this country? And how quick can they do the deployment for me? And that's it. So I think that is one of the other big reasons for why Bitcoin, if you come up with a solution that would free Africans from the financial colonization that Femi was talking about, you can then do that in all the 14 countries that still use a CFA in Africa right now without needing the types of relationships you would need to do that using fiat. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, sometimes we don't think about it, but yeah, Africa has not fulfilled its full potential. This is the chance for Africa to finally compete. And to the point that you hear here, Africa, because of the unique set of factors in Africa, they're solving problems that just don't exist in the United States. And that's a good thing. And then to your point, those solutions can be translated all over the world. Okay, so we are rounding up to the end of the conversation. I'd love for my panelists to give their closing thoughts on Bitcoin adoption in Africa and what you'd like to leave the audience with. So we'll start with Janet.
I guess my message to the world, as you design products and you, let's say for Africa, the focus should not be about Bitcoin, but what can Bitcoin do for Africa, right? So let's move from the point of being very, I would use the word technology, communicative, to more of what is the use case of this product they're bringing to Africa. What problem does it solve for? And then with that approach, then I guess there'll be a change into how we adopt and grow Bitcoin in Africa.
Very good, thank you. KG?
Cool. For me, I'd like to see more people building on Bitcoin. I consider myself a catalyst, and I consider myself a catalyst because I want to accelerate the adoption of Bitcoin across the African continent. And yeah, so I think one major thing I've failed to deliver on, and I've told Femi this before, is the idea that there is no spoon, right? So just like in the Matrix, there is no spoon, as the kid said. The one thing we try to do in Africa is on-ramp and off-ramp people, right? But most of the African currencies are too shitty in the first place, right? So why is it so hard to just get people to go directly on a Bitcoin standard? The reasons why to on-ramp or off-ramp is not that attractive if you're using the South African rand, Nigerian naira, Kenya shilling. So just go directly to a Bitcoin standard and earn your Bitcoin, spend your Bitcoin, and everyone lives happily ever after.
Femi?
I guess my last point, and especially to the non-Africans in the room who are hearing this, is I challenge you to change the way you see my continent. We are not looking for help. We're not looking for help. We actually just want to do business with you like another human being that can add value. But particularly the people in the Bitcoin ecosystem, we also want you to understand that the answer to that question, what is Bitcoin useful for, exists in our continent. But you will not see that answer if you're coming to us with the point of view of how can we help you. You will have to come to us with the point of view of what can we learn from you. And we have a lot of things to teach. We have a lot of things to share.
Very good. And I'll leave you with two things. If you enjoyed this conversation, I'd invite you to take a look for my upcoming book, The Bitcoin Leap, How Bitcoin is Transforming Africa. It is one of the first Bitcoin education books that centers the African Bitcoin story. I talked to over 25 African Bitcoiners in over 10 countries to give you kind of a panoramic view of what's going on in Africa. And I would like to invite you to the Africa Bitcoin Conference that is scheduled from December 9th to December 11th in Nairobi, Kenya. You're absolutely welcome to come and join the African Bitcoin ecosystem. Thank you to my panelists, and thank you for your attention.